Only on two, Pastor Carlton Pearson will tell you that Tulsa is the city of his prime and of his crime. His ministry was a sudden and bright supernova before it burned out in a spectacular crash that left Pearson shattered for straying from the story as it had always been told.
But with the release of a new movie that documents his fall, Pearson tells 2 Works 2 anchor Scott Thompson he's never felt healthier, happier, or holier, with a powerful second chance at finding a new kind of spirituality.
Things that I feel like God has called me to do is bridge gaps, not only between cultures and nations and denominations and people, but generations.
20 years ago, Carlton Pearson was a bright and shining shooting star, arcing across the sky of Pentecostal preaching.
You know what I'm talking about.
A suave, sparkling skyrocket of a man who mesmerized Tulsa's powerful evangelical community.
Rises up inside of you.
I lived that way. I had mastered the craft of it.
And a close friend of your parents.
A protege of Oral Roberts, a graduate of his university, he ministered to 5,000 followers every Sunday at his Southside Higher Dimensions Church, and with his Azusa conferences to standing room crowds at the Mabee Center and the Downtown Convention Center.
I knew what to say over the pulpit. I knew what words they needed to hear.
Thank you,
Thank you for coming.
He was a regular guest on Global Christian Television, and because of his serious polish, he began appearing on mainstream TV, whose bookers saw him as a legitimate voice rather than a sideshow curiosity. He was named a regent of the ORU Board of Directors, counselor to presidents, part of the National Healing after the Murrah Building bombing in 1995. And though Carlton Pearson seemed to have it all,
I kept feeling unsatiated, unsatisfied, and I didn't know why.
he became bored with everything he'd built.
It became tasteless to me. Didn't taste bad, it just had no taste at all.
And so restless and questioning as he approached his 50th birthday 15 years ago, Pastor Pearson began to listen to that which had been stirring inside him.
I came up with the conclusion that we probably got it wrong. And we misinterpreted that instead of the Bible being the inspired word of God, it's probably just the inspired word of man about God.
He began to preach inclusion, that everyone goes to heaven, and that there is no hell.
I just couldn't reconcile in my mind eternal torture, weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth. It didn't make sense. And my experience of God was not that way.
But in turning his back on a spiteful and angry God, he unleashed the wrath of what he calls Christianity Incorporated. He was suddenly a mortal threat to the business of the Bible.
And so when something happens that threatens the community, or the doctrine, or the dogma, or the tradition, or the cult belief, everybody gets defensive.
His fall was to be quick and complete.
Some people just turn away from you. That's painful, but it's more bitter when they turn against you.
Other pastors began to attack. He was barred from Oral Roberts University and removed from its board. And its namesake, his mentor, the creator of the prosperity gospel, warned him that preaching inclusion would destroy everything they'd built. He was declared a heretic and would lose his home and his friends.
I baptized those people and counseled them and prayed with them and gotten some of them out of jail and been to the bedsides when they were dying. And I just didn't think that covenant would ever be broken.
And as his congregants at Higher Dimensions began to flee, leaving him unable to pay the mortgage, he lost his church.
I just didn't think that would happen. But when it did, that's when I knew, wow, this is big and this is bad.
I want to ask you something.
It's his story of loss and redemption that's told in the movie Come Sunday, a sleeper hit of last month's Sundance Film Festival. Taking part in its production has been both cathartic and painful.
And did you love him?
Here we go again. A movie will come out, there'll be critics, my name will be used, the people who are angry at me will become angrier, the ones who love me will love me more.
And though a public mea culpa could get it all back and more,
I've had millionaires come up to me and say, if you change your message and go back to what you were, I'll buy you the property, I'll buy the building, we miss you, we need you, we want you as you were.
And when the devil knocks you back,
he says that Carlton Pearson is dead.
We love you at All Souls.
The reborn one, the newly energized one, is the Pastor Pearson who makes monthly Sunday visits to All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, and the one who can now reach hundreds of thousands around the world from his living room with Facebook and YouTube messages. Messages, he hopes, that offer a new perception of God for the 21st century.
The message that we have received, for which we paid a huge price, has opened a whole new world for us.
It's the message he's convinced his mentor heard as the two sat together and Oral Roberts approached the end of his life.
But I convinced him, I think, and when I finished, he stood up, and there's a scene in the movie about he put his hand in his back pocket and he looked up to the ceiling and he said, I've listened very carefully to everything you said. Long pause. And I like what I hear. Man, that was as close to an affirmation as I was going to get.
And to an older, chastened, and yet happier Carlton Pearson, that now serves as quite enough.
I think there's so much more to God than we have tried to imagine.
Scott Thompson, 2 Works for You.
It is a fascinating story. Come Sunday, we'll have a limited theatrical release, and then you can see it on Netflix April 13th.